Hey everyone, welcome to the Catholicpreneur podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Fisher. Today I have Dominic. Dominic, what's your last name again?
Yeah, de Souza. It's
De
Portuguese
Souza.
from Brazil.
We just met, and I'm very excited to be connecting. So I guess let's just start. Dominic, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do.
Oh, gosh. Okay, I work full-time in marketing. I'm the director of marketing for a nonprofit. And on the side, I get up to ludicrously epic, crazy stuff to try to do good in the world and let off creative steam. And that's kind of how we met on LinkedIn,
Yeah,
just talking about stuff. And thought it'd be cool to hunker down and say hi and talk about what we're up to.
definitely. Good. No, I appreciate it. How have you always been Catholic?
I've been grateful to be, yeah. So I was born cradle Catholic, and now trying to navigate and figure out my own adult response to this beautiful call. So,
Very cool. Good. I'm also cradle Catholic, so it's and then my wife, she just came into the church
oh wow,
over 2 years ago now. So kind of neat. But yeah, so we wanted to jam and just like connect kind of over a podcast episode in a sense and learn about. So I went to school for advertising public relations. I love Dominic and I were talking on DM. So I one of the things I'm most interested in, as many of you know, is like marketing, social media, and how that all intersects with the church. So
mhm.
Dominic, I'd be curious kind of your thoughts on that and what you do that kind of overlaps with those things.
Man, I mean that's a massive question. Let's go down like that rabbit hole a little bit more. Um, Allow me to be annoying and Jesuit and ask you. So, where are you coming from? Like, why does it interest you? Like, what's the problem you're trying to solve with it?
Yeah, that is a good question. So I think it's always interesting to me because when I was in high school, I started this Snapchat account where I sent out motivational videos every day to like
Nice.
my friends and classmates, and it blew up so fast just within my school to the point where like everyone was adding me. I wasn't doing any promotion of it whatsoever. And I
Awesome.
think ever since then, like truly, I've been just intrigued by the power of it and the ability to like, if you're a good storyteller or good at crafting a message, like the ability to use it for good. And that was kind of one of the themes that I had in high school ever since then. So that's kind of why I got into marketing, ad PR in college and whatnot. And then right now working for a company, we have a software product called Catholic Social Media. So we're like helping parishes and dioceses with that.
Nice.
Um, I see a lot of like Catholic creators obviously doing good things on social media too. And so like I don't know, I think that's where it peaked. And I feel like that's where I was like, okay, I know there's something here.
Mhm.
I know there's a large population of people online on social media that might not be introduced to the church or the
Mhm.
gospel otherwise.
Mhm.
And so I guess that's where my intrigue comes from, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. So, um, gosh, okay, where to go with this? So there's actually, okay, this is kind of funny, and it's kind of funny how it was a little prompt on Facebook, and it was probably in the Catholic Creatives group. And this prompt is like sunk deep into it's become a core memory. Where somebody said, if you had $1 million and you could like spend it on your local parish or something to do evangelization or something, like what would you do?
Mm,
And all of a sudden, it just became really, really obvious what I would do. And it would not actually be to start, well, men's group and faith education programs and whatever. It just struck me, no, I would want to do something different. First, I'd take a portion of the proceeds, get a little, what would you call it? Spiritual investment or not insurance, spiritual insurance going and hire, or not hire, pay a local convent or a community to pray for us and get some, 24/7 adoration going. So get that in the bank, and then take the rest of the money and find all of the people, the young people in the parish who are doing cool stuff with their lives. Oh, sorry. Part of the prompt was on social media. What would you do on social media?
okay.
And it just became really obvious. Go find all the cool young people doing cool stuff, not cool Catholic stuff, but Catholics doing cool stuff.
Hmm.
Um, and then support them and find a way to help them kind of, you know, vet them and whatever, help them blow up, because it just seems obvious to me that line from scripture, the one it's really resonated with me, which is, um, what are the reasons for the hope that is in you? If you can't see that hope, you're never going to show up for the reasons. Um, just listening to this really awesome conversation just today with, I can't remember his name, but it was like, dang it, it's not Mitch Connell. Anyhow, he's the young British atheist who's like having these phenomenally fascinating conversations with a bunch of people. Anyhow, he made the point that the more specific your answer, often the more uninterested we are in the actual outcomes. Like how many atoms are in, this lamp on the table. It's like, yeah, you could get insanely specific and probably be absolutely accurate, and then the answer would have absolutely no meaning. Because we're motivated by storytelling, we're motivated by meaning and purpose and adventure and action and things that do things and orient us with our lives, the kinds of things that prod us to level up like 1%, 1 degree at a time. And I think a lot of us today, we're not used to seeing anybody motivated by faith to engage with the adventure of life and to just love being alive. In fact, if you are hyper motivated, like in your faith, it's kind of a norm that you either tend to be like overly rigorous with your faith life, and I can absolutely say that because I came from an extremely rigorous Christian sort of fundamentalist Catholic cult thing. So I get it, and I can understand why. So we either tend to do that, or we like faith doesn't really matter at all, and I'm just going to have fun and do whatever I want. And I'm kind of like trying to figure out, well, what's the middle, between these two excesses? Like, what's the middle thing that's all about discovering what it means to be a human fully alive? Because it's in a human fully alive, fully present, fully engaged, maximally here. That is an open window for the Holy Spirit to be able to show up at all and communicate with people. Those who are like locked up in the top left quadrant of their brains, are not great communicators for the gospel. And unfortunately, there's a lot of them on YouTube. And I may be one of them, so I'll allow everybody else to judge that. Being a full-on human being is like step number one for being Christ's presence to oneself and to others in the world. So finding people who are doing that, who are like just in love with being alive, in love with doing things that bring hope and fun and meaning and enjoyment to others, and are absolutely not basically trying to guilt people into completing a checklist so that they can like get into the kingdom because we got to save them all, y'all. Otherwise, we're all going to burn. It's like, okay, that doesn't work, or at least it might in the short term. It doesn't in the long term. So anyhow, all of that to say, I think to start answering the question, what would I do with marketing, or how would I start helping or trying to contribute to marketing? It's like, who's fully alive? Go out and find them and partner with them or collaborate with them to do cool stuff. And that actually goes back to what you did on, like, you're talking about Snapchat. That's kind of my cardinal rule for like marketing. Do cool stuff people want to talk about. Don't wait for somebody to pay you to come and start taking action about something. It's like, no, you show up and move based on something that you love, that you think is a good idea, and try it. And maybe it'll be wrong. And maybe a year from now you realize, okay, that was dumb, but heck, I learned a bunch. And now my focus is a little clearer, or the fact that I've been in motion means I'm now more able and open to see what opportunities I should be following. Most people just don't even start. Even if they like something, they just don't even begin anything at all. Again, another reason why we connected, because I saw your podcast and was like, dude, I wish I could have started this podcast, because I'm so glad somebody's doing it. So good for you.
Thank you. Yeah. That's such an important theme. What, like, the overall what you're saying, because I think, well, first of all, to evangelize anyone, especially if it's going to be on social media where things are just so instantaneous and like they're just infinite scrolling, like you're not going to evangelize with like repeating doctrine, or just like, the only way you're going to do it on social media is pure like living out your vocation, living joyfully like a fully alive human, like you said, like sharing your life in a way that's like productive and inviting, and having that then be like the extension, like when people see that and they're like, why is this person that way? Like, it's like pointing to Jesus, it's pointing to the truth, it's pointing to the Catholic Church. So it's like, I think that's the most effective way you can do it. And I think there's people that are starting to do that on different platforms and in a more effective way. It's really difficult because you have to be good at storytelling. Number one, to your point, you have to be able to tell a good story. And number two, there's a lot of documenting. It could be filming, it could be writing, it could be a podcast, like, audio. There's different formats, but you have to be good at a lot of different formats, I feel like, to make that happen. And so there's like, it, it can be a challenge, I feel like.
Yeah.
But to that's a really interesting prompt, the $1 million question, because when it comes to $1 million in social media, some people would think, oh, I'll run Facebook ads, like maybe geographic targeted Facebook ads for my parish, but putting a support system around young, lively people that are going out and doing something, making something happen, and living a life rooted in Christ, like, that's so much more inviting, I feel like, to just the typical young social media scroller. Like when you see something inviting, you see somebody doing something exciting and beautiful, and you start to consume, what they're putting out, and you start to see,
Mm-hmm.
The type of life that they're living.
Yeah.
Then it just begs that question, like,
Like
why are they
why
so
exactly?
joyful?
Like why? Yeah. Like so, especially today with the culture the way that it is and everything that's going on, so much of us young people, we don't even know why we're here. We don't know what we're supposed to do, and this just grinds my gears. We don't even know what sort of future we have a shot at building, or even how we're going to get there. And there's so much anger and there's so much burnout. And I mean, I get it, and I feel a lot of it too. Um, I get so annoyed at all of the professional prognoses or the diagnostics of the future and how bad it's going to be, and it's just going to keep getting worse and worse and stuff. And I'm like, dude, God love you, but you're out of here in 10 years. Okay. I got to live in this thing. And then
Mm-hmm.
my daughter is going to be 40 years after that. I mean, then she's got to step up to the plate. What world am I going to be inheriting, or am I going to be living? Like, what do I actually do to try to fix this? Because nobody moves or thrives in a state of fear, right?
Mm-hmm.
And okay, so we're talking about creativity. Um, Whenever you're in a state of stress or danger, right? It's just basic human stuff. Your body prioritizes just basic survival skills. So stuff like creativity um, shuts off, like, so your right brain kind of shuts off and everything goes into the left side, which is, how do I get through today? What do I need to like just do or not do just to survive? And in a lot of ways, especially a lot of young people, I think today, my generation, probably yours too, I think we're close in age here a bit, um, we end up having to live a kind of life that is excessively focused on just pure survival. And something like trying to be creative has become uh, it seems almost frivolous, or just ridiculous for somebody to spend that sort of time when you should just be a plumber, for God's sake. And you know as opposed to today, where we have this phenomenal opportunity for a creator economy, which is a whole nother
Mm-hmm.
discussion. This is the first time, I think, in human history where a creator could, if they figured a certain set of things out, could make a living for themselves, or could partner up or collaborate up to do incredibly cool things that could start to build things like a better future for others, for themselves, and show up for each other to demonstrate that thing about being actually alive. And the thing that's delightful about that is that joy is contagious, right? I'm going to say holiness too, and it's not just me. Holiness is contagious, right? Heck, holy joy, like, what is that going to do? You put those together. There's a book I just finished reading, which is really excellent, on rigidity, and actually why the Holy Father keeps talking about rigidity as like a spiritual sickness, and it was just really, really fascinating. So I pulled a guy aside and we did 3 short episodes on the Smart Catholics channel about that. And it became just so obvious, like reading through his book, as he charts the progress of these 2 temptations that faithful Catholics have: rigidity on the one side and laxity on the other. And these are
Mm-hmm.
2 extremes of how people try to solve problems. And the point of the book and of the Holy Father is like, no, neither are actually appropriate responses, because both lose sight of the actual human being and the person in the middle, the person that
Mm-hmm.
actually needs an understanding of rigidity and of laws, but the capacity to flex them, or the capacity to know when to apply them and how to apply them. And that's called virtue, being in the middle, it not being on these edges. And I'd never considered that, and I thought it was absolutely
Yeah.
fascinating. But so then he went and he charts this progress, or these 2 temptations, basically throughout history. And it was hilarious, not hilarious, it was tragic, or whatever, to read how throughout human history we've continued to struggle with all the same questions. And he talks about the early heresies in the church and stuff. And I'm reading these and I'm like, this is today's headlines. These thoughts are today's problems. It's like we didn't leave, I don't know who said this, the past is not even gone, or the past, it's not even past, it's all still here. And it was just that sense of like reading all this stuff, the senses of depression, of nihilism, of like wrestling with the outcomes of certain ideas. Like we didn't leave any of that in the past. All that happened, it's like, you ever heard of the word palimpsest? It's like when a map is made on top of another map. Um, and sometimes you can sort of see the underlines of the previous map kind of beneath what's been traced on top of it or something. Um, I don't know, people did that to preserve paper, or it's like it's an older map and now the topography has changed. So you got to draw new roads on top of it or something. And so you got like two different conflicting maps or whatever. History and our the philosophy that permeates all of our culture and everything that we're trying to navigate right now, it's a maze of ideas that have not gone to die. They're all still here. And then we'll sort of answer a heresy or answer a problem or posit a new solution to how to navigate life. And then that won't like solve things and all the bad answers go away. It's like, no, it all stays in the mix. And we're just like trying to keep contributing better and better cultures and praxis and whatever. And then you end up with like a word like today, and then you go and you throw everything online, and then anybody can be an influencer, and nobody is committed to the truth. And you end up with a whole ton of people who go and learn about truth without it actually transforming them. It's like people learning sheet music and how notation works and how music works without ever actually playing an instrument. And then they go up and they blog about it forever. Like you've missed the point of what sheet music is about. It's supposed to make you into an amazing musician. You can't, um, and so then you get a ton of people and they're just like, and then algorithms feed you with all of these conflicting ideas. And then we end up with a lot of what we have today, where we don't even know why we should be alive. We're not even making kids anymore, like at all. Like we don't even want to, we're not even interested in it. We don't even know how to approach each other. We don't even know how to talk to each other. We don't know how to actually just simply be alive. And yes, this is a massively complex thing. You talk about diet and toxins and whatever, cultural pressures and bad media. And okay, so that's the thing. It's like everything. We're never going to stop having crises. Like you and I were just chatting before we hit record about, every generation will always have a crisis for the next 10,000 years, the same way we did for the last 2,000. It's never going to stop. Our goal is to learn to become the kind of person who can navigate these, with, I love these two words, bravery and merriness. Those are the two sort of virtues of Robin Hood. He was brave and he was merry. And I love that attitude. So finding people or becoming the kind of person who can be brave and who can be merry in this kind of world, that's interesting and contagious stuff,
Yeah.
And there's a billion ways to do it, so we'll never run out of content creators or just anybody who wants to start doing that sort of thing.
Right. No, that is fascinating. That's beautiful how you put that. And it's almost like everything you just said puts words to a lot of things I've been thinking about lately.
Yeah.
There is a lot of like doom and gloom, and a lot of people are kind of aimlessly searching for purpose and for like a message that resonates. And I feel like people are also very willing to grab on to a message that resonates, even if it's not the best message to grab onto. And it's like, you almost have people floating between thing to thing, whatever's resonating in the moment with them, still searching for ultimate truth, finding a little bit of truth in one thing, clinging to that maybe too hard, getting let down by that thing or that group or that identity almost. How do we, if you are a Catholic man, let's try and get a little bit specific. Catholic man, young Catholic man, with creative abilities. Like, what do you think in general? Obviously, I don't want to say every Catholic man should be doing this. What do you think a Catholic man with creative abilities could and should be doing right now to bring forth like that Mary and that joy?
What would you do? What would you say? I mean, maybe you're probably like, I'm doing it. This is my thing. Like, what would you say?
Yeah, I say like, first of all, personally, I've tried to discern, what my gifts are,
Mhm.
what I like, where my gifts and my desires overlap. So I'm like, okay, obviously, like I think the Lord speaks to us through our desires. So I'm like, okay, I like social media, I like creating content. So
Mhm.
here's this podcast that I'm
Yeah.
going to try out. I haven't been doing it for quite a year. My job allows me to overlap a few passions as well with social media in the church, helping parishes, helping dioceses, and
Nice.
so I guess discerning what your gifts are, and then also figuring out what a gift plus a desire is, because I feel like if you might have, like, obviously the Lord calls us, I feel like, to use our gifts, but if you might find you're good at something that you don't necessarily like enjoy, and I feel like if you're going after that too hard, you're going to burn out on that thing eventually, because you're not, like, there's no fulfillment or joy in that.
Mhm.
um so I guess finding quickly, like taking action, to your point, taking action to figure out, okay, what's things I enjoy, what are my gifts, where are the overlap,
Mhm.
and like doubling down on those things first of all. So it's like, if you have the ability to craft a message in any way, especially with the tools of social media, um, you have the written word, you have audio, you have video, you have photography, you have all kinds of formats. If you can craft a message that resonates, that captures and displays that like holy joy that you're talking
Yeah.
about,
Yeah.
to me, that is just something that's so needed, because even you have really good Catholic creators that are spreading really good messages, but even some of them are, they're not meant to evangelize. They're more so like these like Catholic bubbles of like, we all agree, and it's just like we're talking bad about this and we're talking good about this, but we all
Mhm.
genuinely agree. And like,
Yeah.
someone who doesn't agree with me and sees my content isn't necessarily going to just join this bubble. Like, it's not really like evangelizing. It's not a
Yeah.
bad thing necessarily, but it's like, sometimes I feel like there's a lot of content that tends to do that. It's either isolates or confirms, like,
Mhm.
okay, we're in this in group. And again, not a bad thing, but it's like, when you're talking about the holy joy that
Mhm.
you're talking about, the stuff that's going to change hearts, you have to like think a little bit outside of that, I think.
Yeah. No, I think so. And I think that there's always time and place for creating content for your tribe, or your part of the spectrum in the church. And um um yeah. I'm a big proponent of a concept called what is it? Radical hospitality. I love this sense of being able to be aware and present and welcoming, maximally welcoming to everybody. Um, Now, that concept also has a corresponding responsibility. And I actually discovered it researching Viking um, bonds of brotherhood, and how it was actually would be played out by Hebrews and Arabs. Like, when you take in a guest, like, every guest is welcome, every guest is sacred. Like, every stranger to the village could be a god in disguise, and so you treat them with reverence. You don't kill strangers. That's why Sodom and Gomorrah was like such a big deal, because they were violating the laws, the divine laws of how to treat strangers. And but there's a corresponding responsibility too, where um, this other person that you're extending hospitality to also has to offer that same um, care and attention and maturity. Because if you overstep or overstay your grounds, well, then now these laws are broken down. I don't have to keep offering the hospitality to you. So just to say that
Mhm.
I think it's a beautiful thing to be able to offer to people, because it's a human thing. And so many thoughts to talk about. I'm trying to make sense of them. Um, Let me pause for a second. What I'd like to do is kind of move further upstream on what we're
Mhm.
talking about. And before we get to the point of like evangelization, which is trying to share to compel or convince or win or woo people to an idea or to a lived experience, it does need to start with who we are. And there's a
I'm back.
okay. In case you need to trim this, I'll try to recap it. I think we have to start with a sense of radical hospitality also to ourselves. Um, Again, because if you're not actually fully here, if you don't know who you are and what motivates you or what interests you, um, well, you won't be an effective witness. And I don't like using that as kind of the motivator, because there's a point at which we're not here um, exclusively to try to win other people to our side and for us to get in. I'm initially here because I was gifted myself by someone else. I've been gifted myself to cultivate, nurture, to educate, level up, and enter into a very deep relationship with the Trinity of God, self, and other. So love God above all things, neighbor as oneself, or your brother or your family or whatever as oneself. But if you have no idea who you are, and that's really the only starting point that all of us really have from like day one, waking up, like I'm the only first thing that I can like tangibly experience and that I'm responsible for. Now, problem is when that runs into radical sort of isolation, like lone wolf, just me and my relationship to Christ, and I'm getting out of here, and sucks to be you and your life choices. And then that violates like radical hospitality. Where I'm going with this is starting with something as a creative. So to answer your question about the idea of being a creative young man in today's world, perhaps, I think it has to begin with you spending time doing something that you love and you enjoy, and then just trying it and testing it and doing it. And definitely don't do it so you can make money off of it. There's a really good reason why Scripture says you can't serve both God or money. You got to pick one, because the moment you try to like align them or force them, like money always ends up coming out on top, because it's an instant left brain practicalating. That's a bad word. It reduces everything down into the specific rituals and liturgy that go into making money.
Mm-hmm.
Now that can be a good thing, but there's a reason why it's like you don't put that as the goal of your life, and you don't start that too young in your process or too early in your process, because you can end up derailing your very own ability to discover the things that you love. Love is never something that is transactional. It's always like this, um, pressed down, overflowing, shaken together sort of thing. The more that you do, the more life you have to keep doing it. That's what creativity is. You're tapping into the creative energy that keeps this universe constantly, growing and evolving and developing and adapting to every possible situation. So in being a man, okay, sure, I can speak to that perhaps because I've been trying to figure that out and do that myself. First thing, obviously, you gotta make your bed and carry your cross. Okay, so if you got a job, you got a family to take care of, you do what you need to do with that. But then you got to take that time to do something creative that is for you, and it could be different, right? For some people, it could be I don't know, it could be volunteering somewhere, or it could be doing a side project. It could be showing up for somebody else, and I think that you often have no idea what it is until you go out and just do it. And then all of a sudden, something like clicks and you go, I love this. And I don't know why. Or this seems really cool. Let's keep doing it. Could be ziplining, or I don't know, hiking or adventuring. It could be external, could be internal. It could be reading. It could be just simply the joy of being able to read. Here's the thing that happens, though. You sort of touched on this, I think. As you get into doing a thing, I think this is actually something I learned this past month from Alex Hormozy. I was watching one of his videos. He makes a point that like once you start doing something, then you do it over a period of time. What then starts, and especially if you can pay attention to what the heck you're up to, your observation of everything that you're doing, you start being able to discern a pattern. And then at some point, you're able to start figuring out, why do I like doing this thing? There's something else going on. Like I'm really enjoying this, but there's something else even deeper that's kind of pulling on my attention. Now that only happens only after you've done a thing for a long time. So perhaps it could be, I don't know, drawing superheroes, and you might just absolutely love it. Some people will take that love and that joy, and I don't know, create an Etsy store or a Patreon and just commission that. Okay, now that could be a good way to create money, and I think you could probably do that and have a ton of fun and make a whole lot of income, and a lot of people on Patreon do. I think you could do that and also still balance, this is something I do, but without losing my own joy for the thing that I'm doing. And maybe over a year, 2 years of like doing this, you begin to realize, oh, what I'm actually in love with is the examples of these characters. And I think I actually want to be telling my own stories, maybe of my own characters, or heck, it could be not fan art. What is it called? Fan fiction. Maybe I'm telling fan fiction of this stuff, and then maybe other people love it, or maybe I just do it for me, right? And and then you do that for a while, and then you begin to realize, oh, I'm actually like this is really cool, but I'm actually really motivated by something else. I'm actually really motivated by the lived experience of being the kind of person who does this stuff. Maybe it takes you 10 years to finally realize that, right? You've gone from like messing around with sheet music to realizing, God, I just really want to play the instrument and become a musician. And then you have to practice, start doing that. And yeah, you do it badly. And then you start to figure out, and then one day it clicks. And then the instrument starts to sing, or you start to move beyond the need to do it for an audience, or even the need like just for your own enjoyment. You begin to realize this is a good thing that I need to be doing. And maybe, and here's where you start, for example, echoing what they'll say in the East, your dharma, the thing that I am called to do, the thing that I'm here to do, my good contribution based on the hand of cards I was dealt when I was born and the extent of my ability to level up in this crazy sandbox that we call life. Here's the thing that's like such an obvious good, and I could see dedicating my whole life to this thing because it's going to level me up and it's going to more deeply transform me. Now, a moral theologian might be like, yes, but you're still motivated by the selfish goal of like self-enjoyment in this thing. It's like, yeah, okay, just give us a break. We're still leveling up. 10 years later, I might reach a point where I can like completely dispassionately enter into something wonderful and good because I finally recognize this is a path of action God is taking through me to contribute to my own human flourishing and those around me, and collaborating with him in doing this thing. So what you're doing is you're learning to play the meta game, of why you're here. But you can't ever learn that unless you actually do the base level stuff that is just cool and motivates you because it's something that you love. I have behind me in the last 25 years of my messing around with all this stuff, it's not a graveyard of projects, which is the wrong way to look at it, but it's like stepping stones of a ton of projects that all died. And when I was doing them, it's like, man, this is amazing and I love doing it. And then a year later, realize, oh, what I was actually doing was teaching myself a specific skill, or it was a cool thing to do. Time for that one to be done. Now I've leveled up, and this has opened up a new space of interest. And now let's mess around with that for a while. And then like 10 years later, like, oh, here's why I'm actually here. And I feel like I'm starting to, after 10 years, begin to see, why am I actually in love with all the stuff that I end up doing? I'm starting to see my own metagame. And I don't know exactly where that ends up 10 years from now, but it's really cool to start discovering that. I've got a picture in my mind, a metaphor of like what it's like to be a human being. And part of the challenge is that we literally cannot see ourselves. It's like if you close your eyes to see yourself, like on the inside, it's just black. It's the one thing that you can't see. You can sort of start to see everybody else. You can intuit somebody else. You can get a sense of like who a person is. And when they're not around, you think about them, you just get that instant sense of who that person is. Now, maybe other people are different. This is just my issue. But when I go to look at myself, there's a point at which I can't see myself anymore. I think that's partly appropriate because I can only discover myself in relationship with other people. I kind of need other people's feedback. This is what we do as children. Like, hey, I did a cool drawing. And then I watch your reaction. Do you like it? Disapprove of it? Hey, I'm wearing something cool today, or I did this cool thing. Do you see me jumping off the thing? And then validation, from others helps us start to build a sense of, I like being the kind of person that creates those kind of responses, or I like the way that and then you graduate to, I like the way I kind of feel when I do these things. I start validating myself, but it's like this mental image I have is like you're a blind person perhaps, and you wake up on a beach, like after a shipwreck, and you don't know what you're like or what you feel like. And so you roll around on the sand to create impressions. And then your fingers can like feel those impressions to get a sense of like, who am I like? And that's what we end up doing, especially as creative people, because we're sort of attuned to this sort of stuff. You're kind of rolling around in the sand of your life. Let me do a ton of stuff because I don't know what I love until I try it. And sometimes I'll really surprise myself. And sometimes I just need to do a ton of stuff to realize I don't like any of that. Maybe I need to be trying something else. But this is sort of comes back to the beginning of what we're talking about. most people just don't even start. Most people don't even do anything. There's a lot of reasons why. And so if you can find like, what is the 1% thing that just moves me? I want to go back and ask you what you're thinking about all of this, but let me leave with this sort of last thought. It's coming back again, starting way upstream. Like before you get to the point of talking to anybody else, trying to influence anybody else, come home to yourself. A lot of us are so
Mm-hmm.
disassociated, disembodied, like we're not even at home at all, like inside, not just your own body, your own sense of self. This is why I love tools like Jungian archetypes, right? Or the Enneagram, where you can get a quick thumbnail sketch of like, who am I? And I specifically love those two personality typing tools because they're not just like diagnostic, they're story based. And any one of those particular tools or those like the characters, the archetypal characters, or the different faces of God that the Enneagram points out, each one of them is motivated to become a specific kind of person, which means I kind of know where I am. I have a compulsion to do the wrong sort of thing, but if I can figure it out, I can become this kind of person. And if I can balance myself, I have a goal. I can become this kind of person. And the only way for me to get there is to collaborate with the creative energy and ongoing grace of God to start to figure that out. It might take me my whole life. And so if you have no idea who you are or where to start, using tools like that can really help to get a sense of where am I weak? And why do I keep doing the things that I'm doing? That's why confessors, like throughout last thousands of years, have used these tools to like stop trying to witness to everybody else if you're not even there, if you're just an empty shell, and there's no Christ shining through because you're not even standing in the doorway. You're not even here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think we see with the saints. The saint is the
Yeah.
person. Okay, some of them are really great preachers, but the majority of them are just like, you walk up to them, there's like this gravitas and this weight. They're really here. And when they turn and pay attention to you, you feel so seen. And it's like you can't even control the joy that you almost feel. Okay, you either absolutely hate it or you absolutely love it. Saints have this amazing polarizing effect when you meet them in person because their attention is so pure and it's such an amazing conduit for the beautiful attention that God wants to pay to each of us. That was a whole bunch. What's going through your mind?
That was amazing. Yeah. No, I think the point of starting, the only way we can learn about ourselves is to start. And I feel like I don't know if this is just like a generational thing or if it's always been the case, but I feel like there's desire a lot of people have to become someone or something right now.
Mm,
And
yeah.
it takes a lot of time to figure out what some people figure out. Like it takes years and decades to try things,
Yeah.
to do new things, see what you like, see what you're passionate about, see what you're good at, and build yourself into like, okay, this is the gift, this is the desire, the thing that I want to do.
Yeah.
Um, and I think a lot of people want to skip all of the testing things out, and they want to skip. I mean, I feel like I'm guilty of it too. Like find like,
Oh,
oh
yeah.
man, if I could just get to this
Totally.
point, like we want to skip that part, but it's like there is so much beauty in learning about yourself through activity, through taking action, and I think fear is the biggest thing holding people back, especially young men right now, like
Mhm.
holding us back from taking action in certain areas. Like
Yeah.
don't want to say the wrong thing, don't want to do the wrong thing, I don't want to be judged in this way. And it's like
Sure.
overcoming that fear is so important to be able to do anything, accomplish anything.
Well, maybe to just not throw a wrinkle into this, but to just let guys know that they're seen as well. It's also true that in our cultural state, kind of where we live, let's say first world West, perhaps, and maybe North America. I can't speak for the rest of the world, perhaps, but um, the moment you kind of become a man, and that's a whole discussion of like how any of us actually know that, and that's a massive problem. But the moment we sort of have to become a man, and all of this like creative energy starts to show up, and it's like, time to start figuring out how this is. It's kind of at that moment where the whole culture comes and dunks on you, and you've either got a massive college debt or you have to make income like immediately. Um, and that comes after perhaps a couple of decades of not having any responsibilities at all. So we go from this kind of Peter Pan extension of our childhood to then having to instantly get into like high functioning business. And the and then if you have additional responsibilities like you got married or you got college debt or you got sick family members you're trying to take care of, the problem with all of this is you can't afford to fail. And especially I think in the first world, especially America, um, our culture kicks young people out of the home very early on, unless you have a specific culture that doesn't. So there's no runway, there's no landing ground for young people, especially to be able to take risks, um, and be able to try stuff and know that if something doesn't go well, I have a network or I have family that's going to help take care of me. Now, this can't absolve you of the responsibility of making really good choices and taking very careful, calculated risks. And you know this, I think, as an entrepreneur, that um, we will take risks, but dude, we will analyze the heck out of them to make sure that they are the most responsible ones that we can take. Um, but with this current culture, it's I don't know how to talk about this. It makes me so mad. Like my wife and I go off on it all the time. It's like as soon as you like hit 18 or 21 or whatever, it's like get out of the house. You got to pay for your own home. You got to, pay for all of your own expenses and all of this stuff. And it's like I still haven't even leveled up out of, McDonald's and just being a cashier or something like that. And now I have all of these expenses, and especially if you've gone to college, like there's
Mm-hmm.
to an absolute inability to take risks at the very age in your life when you have the boldness and the creativity to perhaps do that and take risks. So like
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thing it's a tragic thing that I see with current culture. I think that it is perhaps starting to turn around because we've started to discover or create the tools that allow us to start creating that kind of freedom for ourselves. Stuff like, Patreon or YouTubing or starting a podcast. And then, yes, if you can do it right and if you can access the right audience, it can help create the kind of freedom and motion for you to start building that sort of stuff. But then with all of these tools, and you could say anybody can access these tools, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It's like, well, the problem is the previous 10 years we just talked about. If you have this problem with not training people or training, I'll say young men, not giving young men enough responsibility when they're younger, from a very young age, encouraging them to live into and to copy models of things like heroic masculinity, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of reasons why I like what Jordan Peterson's putting down in terms of giving young men a reason or a cause and specific tasks every day that you must excel at, like make your bed and just do that. And then you've mastered, that's level one. You've mastered that. Now, next thing, you take out the trash without complaining. You wash the dishes. You show up and you volunteer at the local homeless shelter. You show up at your parish. You go, it gets to a point where as a young man, before you, all of this stuff has to turn into money and people actually depend on you to stay alive. Before you get to that point, show up and just volunteer to carry somebody else's cross and help them out and find out what kind of person you become. Um, I think that's not just a very good human thing to do. I think it's a specifically Catholic Christian thing to do. For young
Mm-hmm.
men, you're modeling the kind of thing Christ did. And so this kind of goes back to, I think we were talking about earlier. I was rereading the Gospels recently, last year, and it really hit home in a way I'd never seen before. How much of Christ's time was spent just feeding people, calming them, telling them how do we say, stories to motivate them to live better lives, um, to orient themselves towards truth and towards better living. Um, what did I say? Feeding, healing, exercising, right? Solving problems. All of this stuff is basic social stuff. Like, are we even here to at a level to where we can enjoy life together? Like, at all? If we're all just like trying to survive, we're never going to progress beyond infighting and tribalism and like my tribe must survive, I must survive at the expense of everybody else because I wasn't given everybody else taken care of. I need dinner now, right? If we can't get to a point, this is one of the genius things or the charisms that men are called to contribute is we build arcs, we build safety, we bring order, we impress order on the chaos that is our lives. And we do that without damaging or hurting other people. And we find a way to be able to show up and to contribute what we have without killing ourselves. And okay, that's a really hard thing to thread. And young men, I'm probably guessing for you, and it is for me because I have no idea. There's nobody in the culture today to look to who's doing it really well. I kind of think that's why we turn to a lot of fiction, because it's in fiction that we get a lot of characters who do it really well and that we really like. It's one reason why I love fiction. Like, it's my first love before everything else. Like, I love storytelling. We just don't have a culture for, again, we're talking about men here. We don't have a culture of how to help young men be men and to thrive in that and to figure out how to contribute in that. There's three kinds of manhood that I see going on right now. And I'm curious what you think about this. I thought it was kind of funny when I made it up. We've got red-pilled masculinity, right? You've got Red Bull masculinity. And then, okay, those are the problems, right? Those are the two opposites of the extremes. Like red-pilled, it's like it's, I don't know, it's conspiracy theories, or it's dunking on everybody, and it's like being super, I don't know, you want to dominate everything and stuff. And then you got the Red Bull masculinity. It's like there's maybe, okay, Red Bull is really fun. I'm not dunking on the brand, but as a concept for how to define masculinity, it's all like, muscles and fast cars and, playing loose with women and not actually, I mean, genuinely not being a healthy, helpful human male. There's no fathering, there's no brothering, there's no friending, there's no building a future that we can all rely on together. So between those two, like, what's the option? Well, I recently saw the movie The Thin Red Line. I loved it, and I think that's the kind of masculinity that we want, where you're in a war zone, and it can feel like that a lot, but it's not just who makes it through, because more often than not, you got the bad guys who kind of make it through any situation. But it's like, do you want to be that kind of guy who makes it through at any cost? Or do you want to be the one who builds this band of brothers, who shows up to father the rest of his team? The person who, let's say, has an intuition that, gosh, there's something beyond all of this. And maybe I've experienced it, like the Jim Caviezel character does. I can't remember his name. Anyhow, I've intuited or experienced something transcendent that I just can't communicate to anybody. But I can transform my life, and I can allow it to sink down deep and influence my attitude to everything without shoulding on anybody else. Like, I've seen the truth, y'all. You should be on my side of the line and following my tenets and hadiths and like whatever. He doesn't do that. He's very confidently who he is. I love that one line. Like what did he say? If there's a problem, like, Captain, I want to go be in it. Or like, there's a problem situation. This guy's too scared to move. I volunteer. I want to go in. I know that I have more of what it takes to be helpful in this situation than this other guy does. Showing up and picking up a cross nobody asked you to do. Right? I love that vision of masculinity. Let me stop there for a second. What's going through your mind?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to make sure I note the Thin Red Lines, because I got to read that or watch that. I think you described some stuff I've been seeing too. So the two options for masculinity, like seemingly two options for masculinity, you see a lot of that, especially played out on social media. And I think back to what I was saying earlier with the tendency to gravitate towards messages or people, like a lot of men see those different messages and grab onto that because there is some truth to it that resonates with them, but it's not the fullness of the truth of like what they're created to be.
Yeah.
And I think as of lately too, any male figure out there who's coming out and being strong and courageous is like attractive to young men because they might not have seen that very much lately. So it's the problem with it then is like, yeah, there's the extremes that are just like not the fullness. And so I think obviously like Christ being crucified is like the ultimate image for the man to look up to. Like it's that's the fullness of manhood of sacrificial love. And it's like, that is what we should look at too. But how do you how do you relay that to the world? How do you relate it to other people? I guess is the challenge. I think, especially non-Catholics or non-Christians, like
Yeah.
to say Christ is the perfect man to look up to. You know, like that's not always going to right off the bat resonate with someone, but being somebody who imitates Christ in your daily life,
Mm-hmm.
I think most men would find that attractive, even if they, whether they knew or not, that's who you were, as someone who was trying to imitate Christ.
Agreed.
Um,
Yeah.
but you just
What ends up, that's what people then do. They're like, dude, what is the reason for the hope that's in you? But that
right,
means that space of time had to happen where they were like enchanted by what they saw, and it inspired them, it convicts them, and then they finally get to a point where they're like, okay, how are you like not taking yourself off the game board? Like three of my friends did that in high school, and this guy went and did this other horrific thing. You know, nobody knows how or wants to be alive, and yet you've got something that seems like really cool, and
mm,
you don't make anybody feel, you know, the worse for their decisions. In fact,
no,
you're always here to sort of uplift people. I like your point about, yes, let's imitate Christ. Part of the challenge with using that kind of language, as theologically accurate as it is that it's what do you say? Unless you spend literally a lot of time with him. For most people, when you say that, they think of a Jewish rabbi from 2,000 years ago. Um,
mm,
so you need modern insights into this transcendental truth, this person who embodies himself or who gives of himself and enters into um, these wonderful examples throughout time and history. And I think in our time, okay, maybe like I say, we can't find a lot of great men examples, and who knows, maybe the guys and the people in the comments would be like, yeah, this guy's like an amazing Christ figure. It's like, good for you. That's awesome. But a lot of fiction, I think, does it really well. Where I'm thinking of like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and you know, maybe Phase 1 and Phase 2. We can argue about some of the later ones, but if you have like examples like Iron Man, and you know, I love like Captain America and some of the early Thor movies, and you know, Black Panther and stuff. What's so cool about a lot of these characters is that every single one of them, that's kind of the point of like telling a story. They all had a moment where they didn't have to pick up the cross that the story called them to. They could have walked away, but they learned early on, I'm a kind of person who does this in this kind of situation. And it's the noble thing to do. It's the honorable thing to do. I will like enjoy living with myself, or I couldn't live with myself if I walked away from this specific invitation. And sure, it's going to be dangerous, but it's just what I need to do. It's like obvious. And so
mm,
that sense of like being a first responder, here's a dangerous situation, how can I show up? Nobody does that off the bat without some kind of prior training, without an attitude that you build up in yourself kind of as a kid and as a young adult, where you see a problem or you see something that's just not right, or that needs to be fixed or could be fixed, and so you just go and do it without somebody having to tell you to. um, the moment you're like waiting for an audience to approve of you is the moment you will never do anything in your life. You need to
mm,
show up, and then the audience turns around and goes, hey, we all kind of want to do that too. Can you keep talking? You know, share with us how this again goes back to the example of being a musician. You can learn
yes,
sheet music and you can tweet it forever, or you can learn to be somebody who actually plays music and then enchant people with the music. And then they go, how did you do that? I don't even know how you got to that skill.
yeah,
But then somebody who's like a consummate musician um, will be able to understand all of the steps that it takes to get to that point. Um, and at that point, here's where once you can get to a point where you're like super egoic, right? There are some musicians who are absolutely like, how do you say? Oh gosh, they're so hardened in their own ego, their own narcissism around the fact that they've excelled at their craft. So obviously, we're not talking about that kind of person. We're talking about somebody who gets to a point where they realize music is something glorious and beautiful, and it's a specific language that I come in resonance with, and I want to communicate it through me. Um, I mean, this sounds, it's kind of like prophecy, you know, or like somebody who's a novelist, for example. I'm a firm believer that writing novels and fiction can be a spiritual path, in the same way that being a monk or being a musician can also be a spiritual path. It can be a source of revelation of what Christ wants to communicate to the world. And sure, maybe you need to write, just in case you're
There you go.
Okay. So in case you need to trim that, sure, maybe you need to write 10, bad novels or poorly crafted novels to level up to start learning to write the one that might actually be helpful. And you might be a bad musician for a long time, but that doesn't, you might not be a great human being for a long time. And most of us aren't, and most of us are going to fail every single day. But that's kind of the point of it all, is to, if you can recognize and not get down or depressed by the fact that because I recognize there's a gap going on, I am not who I want to be. People who can't even see that are the ones who don't even move, because they're not doing anything to be able to observe the fact that I didn't like being that person, or that didn't feel true, or that didn't sound good coming out of me, or I just never want to experience that again. Until you do stuff, you're never going to learn. So you literally have to get up and start testing things and doing things and seeing how it works.
Yeah.
There's I love the what is it? It's the quote from The Night Watch. I don't know if you've ever read that from Game of Thrones, but I'm gonna see if I can find it real quick, because it's just too cool not to share. It's when, so the whole point of The Night Watch is for those who haven't seen the show, they're either like a problem in culture and society, or they're exiled or something. And so they are sent all the way up north to a very dangerous place, and they're called to guard the world against all of the darkness and evil that could be, could be out there. So I gave a talk like a couple of years back when somebody asked me, what's the definition, or what will be the Catholic identity of a identity of the Catholic man? Like, how would I tackle that? So I just went and had a whole lot of fun with, here's all the movies and stories that try to explain and explore that. What kind of anchored it was this specific oath that they take. And so I'll tweak it a little bit for Christian men, and I think it's great. Night gathers, and now my watch begins, and it shall not end until my death. I pledge, you have one, I pledge to love my wife, end my responsibilities, and then be a father to all children. I shall wear no crowns and win no glory. I shall live and die at my post. I am the sword in the darkness. I am the watcher on the walls. I'm the fire that burns against the cold, the light that brings the dawn, the horn that wakes the sleepers, the shield that guards the realms of men. I pledge my life and honor to the night's watch for this night and all the nights to come. What I love about that, like, no matter what kind of man you are, the fact that you're born here as a man, you're called to that same kind of oath. And you can see that that's like the life of Christ, like in an oath. Like, it's amazing. Like, he shows up, he has a task, he does it without asking. He consoles and calms and heals and feeds everybody around him. Those who like want to go deeper with them, who are like actually serious about the thing, then he goes and he hunkers down with them and he gives them that extra training. And then he follows his mission all the way through to the end. Even if it's painful, I hope that, I can do the same. I'm not called to do that right now. So I don't need to prep for that boss fight, but I've got this one right now that I've got to tackle. And whatever leveling up is happening in my life right now, the dragons I got to fight and face, that's where I'm called to be. And so, I don't know. What do you think? What do you think about all of that?
I think that's beautiful, that quote. It sums it up very well. I think that's honestly a good place to end it off for this conversation, because there's a lot to think about there, and this has been very, very, very fun. So I really appreciate you taking the time,
my
Dominic.
pleasure. Thanks for having me. Sure, it started Catholic entrepreneur, and then it just went up to like, yeah, what does it mean to be you? So
right. Well, and I think this has been fun because it's been different, and it completely ties into a lot of like the listeners' questions and things that they're curious about. So I really appreciate your perspective on
good.
things.
I'm glad. And hey, if anybody has a question, they want to reach out to me, I'd be happy to chat with anybody, and just send me a DM on LinkedIn, or or through my website or anything.
Perfect. I'll make sure to add that in the show notes too. But let's do this again sometime, Dominic. Thank you so much. And yeah, have a blessed rest of your evening.